Hi everyone, I'm Rutledge. I'm here with a wonderful young woman, Elise Gasparino, and really happy to highlight some of the issues that young adults face with cancer diagnosis. And I think we're going to have a really good time. Elise has led and founded an organization with the um, I think Pearl Foundation, and I think we're going to have a very interesting interview, and we're going to interview around the most difficult issues that young adults face with cancer diagnosis. Typically, what we start off is with some type of settling exercise, and I find that extremely important. I call it setting the intention, and the reason we do this before we get started in the interview is just to remember that we can reframe, we can settle ourselves, we can ground ourselves. So no matter what situation you're going into, whether it's going to a medical appointment or maybe going to a job interview, or maybe having to deal with a difficult family member, it's a difficult situation, and so on, we can actually take that moment to remember what's important to us and to settle ourselves down. And when we do that, it just kind of grounds ourselves into the relaxation response. And what I found is that people can use the greater wisdom and creativity when they're settled within that moment. So I really think that's a very useful skill. In fact, I use that skill even every morning. First thing in the morning, getting up out of bed, putting my feet in the floor, and just saying, what is it that I want to bring into the world today? How is it that I want to be? So I set that kind of prayer or intention for myself, and I hope that I can be compassionate and clear and kind and wise, and just bring those higher spiritual principles right into the world. So I think it's very important that skill, that memory to kind of reset, reframe, and remember, and that can be the ballast for our journey in life. So that being said, I just ask everyone who's listening, watching, just to find a position in your chair. Oftentimes I say bring yourself off the back of the chair so you're not leaning per se. And then find a balance point. Some point where your spine is relatively straight, and you feel like your shoulders, your back, your head is simply sitting in place, and that you're not actually using any extra muscle per se. And the feet can be flat on the floor, the hands on the knees. Just find that point. The feeling that the head's being pulled up towards the sky, and and then from that kind of place of being grounded in your body, just bring your attention to your feet, being solidly connected to the floor, the weight of the hands and the knees, and the weight of the body in the chair. Just allow yourself to be in this body. Bring your consciousness, your energy into the body. Then bring our attention to our backbone. Just bring your attention now. Just feel the solidness, the physicalness, the groundedness of your backbone, the strength of your backbone. And bring your attention to the front of the chest. And generate kind of a sense of openness, a sense of warmth, a sense of vulnerability, some sense of softness around the level of the heart. So you can feel those two elements of your humanness, that kind of sense of your solid human self, your connection with the ground, and then also the kind of openness, the softness, the heartfulness at the front of your chest. So that's the humanness of us. And you may find that your mind begins to go to other places, or thinking about what's going to happen, or something happened in the past. And you notice that you can simply bring your attention back to your body, Or you can use your breath as a sense of coming back home. Just be very curious now. Use the curious part of your brain to, what does it feel like to breathe? Your sensations. Allow the out breath to be slightly longer than the in breath. Be very curious. What does it feel like to have your body be breathed and doing nothing? And then from that kind of sense of mindfulness, you can kind of generate some positive emotion. So maybe think about kind of loving kindness, that warmth, that heartfulness. Allow your chest to warm. In the middle of your chest, and you need to bring to mind a loved one, somebody you love deeply. Imagine that maybe it's a different time of your life, or maybe it's the image of a little child, or maybe a grandmother, or mother, maybe a Mother's Day. Just bring to mind that person you very much care for and love by. Allow your heart to warm. Send that outwards. Allow your chest to warm. Allow this healing energy to expand in every direction. Like the elements on a stove. Just allow your heart to warm. Just in this moment. Regardless of what you're doing, just allow that sense of deep compassion, deep peace to extend. You can bring to mind somebody who really needs love and caring. Somebody in life that needs healing in some way or form. Someone who's suffering. Bring to mind that image, that person in front of you. Sending your loving intention. May they find peace. May they be free from suffering. May they wish whatever is best for them. Allow them to be healed of a body, mind, or spirit, whatever way is best. And extend that out to all the people in your life you're connected with, you care about. Extend that out again to kind of limitless sense of compassion, that universe compassion, out to all the young adults who've been diagnosed with cancer, close by and throughout the world. Just send your loving wishes, intentions, aspirations for each of them that they may find their way through a very difficult time. For not, maybe they're doing very well, just wish them well through them. And release that again. And just for a moment come back to the sense of being grounded. The body on the ground. The sense of possibility. The mind expanding upwards. And your good healing heart right in the middle of it all. Connection with earth below and heaven above. Just allow that to be as it is. Thank you. That was a longer meditation, but I really think it's important to learn that skill of resetting. And a lot of people just have a relaxation response. They're in a more peaceful space and so on. So thank you for following through with that. So Elise, I'm hoping you can tell us just a bit about yourself, and maybe you can take yourself back to your life before your cancer diagnosis, and as a way to introduce yourself and to tell your story further.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I feel very relaxed and zen now after that. I have to start every morning off that way, right?
Yes.
No, definitely excited to be here and to speak about, being a young adult diagnosed. I was diagnosed when I was 21. So you mentioned, life before that. And life before that, I had a very lovely existence. I had a great family. I did really well in school. I was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. I went to Laurier in Waterloo, so I was doing the business program there. Had a great circle of friends, was part of a lot of business clubs, was doing fairly well academically. And when I was diagnosed, I was actually in Ottawa on a co-op working for Bell Canada.
Wow.
So I was away from home, but was living with a good friend and was enjoying Ottawa because I'd never lived there, obviously, being from Niagara. And I was just getting a lot of pain in my lower abdomen. So I had gone to a doctor there, apparently wasn't a big deal. I thought maybe it was viral. And luckily, a couple weeks later, I had gone home and saw my pediatrician, or I guess my physician there at the time. Kind of as soon as she saw me, because I had grown up with her, she instantly knew something was wrong. So kind of interesting, and just, going to the doctor that knows you and knows your background versus, just a one-off in a clinic. So very happy that I ended up going home that weekend and ended up seeing her. And everything moved, quite quickly from there. It was, doing really well at co-op, away from home, enjoying time with friends in Ottawa, into an extremely adult existence from that. So right after I saw her, it was few days of tests after test. I was probably told the thing that a lot of young adults are told: you're too young, so it's most likely nothing. I did have a growth. It was quite large. It was about the size of a volleyball, they had said. So
a volleyball in your abdomen. Holy smokes.
Yeah, and you could tell, like, I had been away from home, so when it's happening to your body, I was in pain. And that's what triggered it for me, but I didn't notice. I guess when someone pointed out the physical, I noticed it, but my mom actually noticed it because she had seen me for a month or two.
Right.
In your day-to-day, it's kind of like, well, maybe I should go to the gym. You don't kind of notice things as much because it's more gradual, but the pain is what I noticed, thankfully, because a lot of times with ovarian cancer, you don't actually have any symptoms. So went through a bunch of tests there. Again, was told, you're quite young, the tumor's quite big, it's most likely not cancer, but let's keep going through the tests and we'll have to get it removed. So I did have surgery, worked with a great team at Juravinski. I was really lucky to get to go to that center for, my surgery and then subsequent treatment.
That's in Hamilton for people who are listening in. Yeah, so great medical center in Hamilton.
Yeah, very lucky to get to have gone there. And anyway, so had my surgery, going into it kind of just thinking, this is just something that has to be removed. After they biopsied it, turns out it was cancer. So there was still some subsequent kind of areas that they wanted to treat. It hadn't spread, which was great. And so I went through chemo. So I went through about 10 weeks of chemo. And the surgery, I think, does change things, but the chemo really changed things. We talk about when you're a young adult, and it was summertime. I was on co-op, and then was supposed to be going back to school with my friends in the summer. And summer term at Laurier is they have all these fun activities planned. There's a rafting trip. There's a baseball league. So I was really looking forward to a great summer with my friends. Yeah, I had to go to school, but fun all around, right? So this completely changed my summer. And it, it definitely was a change, but I was really lucky because I had great support in my friends, my mom, dad, sister. Someone came to every treatment with me. But there's the physical things, I think, that made it hard for me anyway. And also that point, it's interesting because I was a little younger in that I was at school, but through Pink Pearl, I've got to meet a lot of women where it's like you're at the cusp of things really taking off in your life and really becoming independent. And going through chemo, going through surgery, whatever it is, radiation, whatever you're going through, really puts you back into a stage of dependency. And so I was lucky that I still got to go to school, but I was very reliant on my family and friends for a lot of things. whether it be, you know, doing a chore or helping me like get ready, or, you know, in some cases people were helping me do my homework because my brain just wasn't like functioning in the same way. I know they call it chemo brain and things like that, right? So it's an interesting time because I think it feels like, you know, your life is kind of taking off and then you're put at a standstill. So
Yeah,
I was
so I was just going to say that we had, I went to one of the original young adult retreats, and we came up with this word, disinjectorization, which essentially means you're on a certain trajectory, you're going off like this, and suddenly you're off your trajectory. So it's a disinjectorization. New word.
Right. Exactly. And I think we all probably remember our 20s. I mean, your 20s, so many different emotions. It's, you know, from everything from school to deciding what your career path's going to be, to where you're going to live, to like who you're going to date. And then everything just gets put into way bigger perspective than that. So it's an interesting time, I think, to have had gone through that experience. But in a lot of ways, I think it, you know, post cancer, if you will, it did put things into perspective for me. So I was very much I was always driven, but it accelerated things for me after that, because you really realize, like, I'm not going to waste my time doing what I don't want to do.
Right.
So
that's the positive side of it. You know, it's tough to talk about sometimes, but I'm wondering if we can go right back to really the difficult stuff. You know, because that's like ovarian cancer. You know, this is a tumor that needed chemotherapy, and there must have been some conversations in there that were really kind of scary. And I'm just wondering if you can take us through some of the kind of shocking emotions that you went through as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think the most immediate shock was right after I got out of surgery, because I had thought they had, you know, you're very loopy because you're on a lot of drugs, and I had thought they had said that I had had a hysterectomy, which obviously means, you know, that I wouldn't have any of the reproductive organs to have a child. So I thought I heard that, and it took me a couple days to actually ask if that was the case, because, you know, being 21, you're not thinking about when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, and you want to have kids. But that moment was really tough, and so tough that I waited to even find out, because there were so many emotional things happening at that point. I didn't want to know. I'm lucky in that, you know, one ovary was removed. It wasn't a hysterectomy, so I can still have children. But that was the first moment of just psychologically really tough. You know, because you realize now, like, this has taken away something that you always took for granted, really.
Right.
So, knock on wood, lucky there.
Yeah.
And then I think the second big thing is, and I'm sure a lot of, in saying this, it kind of sounds superficial, but it's physically how you look. So I'm not necessarily a huge girly girl, but, you know, when you're losing your hair, when you're having a pick in your arm, like all those things that make people treat you like you're sick is what really got to me. More so that the hair bothered me, but like had a great group of friends that I wore a wig sometimes. I didn't necessarily when I was around like close friends and family. So that sort of was okay. But what really bothered me was the pick in my arm.
Right. So, the symbol of having a sickness in some sense.
Yeah. And you kind of feel bad for the people that, because, you know, I was still going to school, and there's not a lot of, I was wearing a wig when I was in school, so I don't look sick except for this pick in my arm because it was summertime. You know, if I'm wearing a tank top, you can see that there's clearly a needle in my arm and a bandage around it. So I almost felt, I guess the part that bothered me is I felt bad for people when they would be like, what is that?
Right, yeah.
Like, did you hurt your arm? And then you kind of have to go into, you know, you go into your whole story when I had one friend ask when I was at the supermarket with my mom, who I hadn't seen for a while. I had another girl ask when I was getting coffee at school, at university. So it's those moments where, like, you know, you're having to launch into your whole story when you're just trying to go about your day-to-day life.
Right,
And it's like, felt a little awkward for them because I don't think they realized the question they were asking.
Right, and, you know, they can feel awkward. Just, you know, I'm dealing with somebody who's on chemotherapy for a cancer diagnosis. What do I say? You know.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It's scary for them too in some cases.
Exactly. Because at that point I was fairly used to it, but it was almost like, oh, I wish I didn't have to tell you this, and like, then you go through all the emotional things with them, right? So as I guess, as interesting as it sounds, the physical part was really tough for me. I was really lucky though, because in getting to meet a lot of the women in Pink Pearl, you realize, for young adults, there's a lot of other issues besides the physical.
Yes.
Like a lot of times there's the work component. Like I was still in school, so I didn't have to worry about how I was going to make money. I had my parents to rely on, but when you're at work and that gets taken away from you, you can't go to work. I've heard some really terrible stories about that, and I can imagine the struggle with that. What surprises me is heard some really interesting stories about, people who they thought they had really close family and friends, and that when you get the cancer diagnosis, those people sort of fall away.
Yes.
I was really lucky again that I didn't have that. I mean, for the most part, all of my friends stayed my friends, and I think it's probably the way I dealt with it. I tried to deal with it with a little bit of humor and try to make everyone feel a little comfortable about it.
Right. Were you totally honest with them with each phase? Or was that part of your strategy of keeping your friends?
I mean, I'm pretty almost maybe too blunt about things that happen in terms of like bodily functions and the hair loss and all that. So, and I kind of made it more of a joke, which is typically my nature. Right. So I think that at least that's from what my friends have said back to me. That's what sort of helped them, is that I was still myself with it. But I can imagine, like, when you're going all through that stuff, it's not necessarily the easiest to be yourself. Right. And it's not necessarily easy for the people on the other side to know how to react to it.
Right, yeah. And so having compassion for other people, realizing that this is the first time for them as well, and they can have their own issues and so on, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we need, and what we're trying to do with Pink Pearl a little bit, we have the support services for the women, but what we're starting to get into now is how do you support the family, how do you support the friends, because it's a different situation for everyone, especially when you're young. Like a lot of people, have the elder aunt that might have been sick, or, their great-grandparent that was sick, but very few people have the best friend at age of 20 that were sick.
Right, so we have no experience dealing with it. And the data, the surveys show that the family members suffer as much anxiety and stress as the person with the diagnosis. And I'm just thinking that's even more amplified in the young adult scenarios where you're not expecting this, and people don't have the experience of working with young adults who have a cancer diagnosis.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think when you're the patient too, there's, you feel like, I always liked going to chemotherapy, for example, because you feel like you're doing something to fight it, right? But when you're a family member or a friend and you're observing this, you really don't know, you don't know what to do. And so I guess what my family did, which was really great, is we started the benefit for Juravinsky, and so that gave us, everyone felt like there was something that they could get behind, and the money was going to a great cause, and so it gave us a little bit of focus. Yeah. But otherwise, you would feel really helpless. Like I couldn't imagine if it was my sister in the position versus me. At least I felt like in control, like I could.
Right. You were doing something, you were suffering, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, I do think that when people fundraise in some way or volunteer in some way, it's actually therapeutic for them. So, it makes total sense, and then even for you to have kind of created a charity out of this, it in some way creates meaning. Something good happens from a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah. And I think, I'm lucky now because I'm on the other side of it. So I can say, this happened for a reason. When you're still in it, you can't say that. You don't know what that reason is.
Right.
Some people, it is a terminal illness, and it doesn't feel like lucky. So that's a different scenario. For me, it's definitely, with Pink Pearl, it's brought continual focus back to what's important. Yes. So whether it's a woman at a retreat saying how much we helped, or a scholarship that we've given away, that's how great that is. It's, life, day-to-day life, especially in New York, in fashion and things like that, can all seem quite hyped up and things like that. But what Pink Pearl has done is really brought me back to what's important about things. And for that, I'll forever be grateful, because I wouldn't have normally had that. Granted, I can say I'm grateful because now I'm on the other side of it.
Right.
I think had you have asked me that in the moment, I would have not been grateful.
Not at all. And I guess the other teaching from my perspective is that it's a very personal experience. And so, you're lucky to have said, this, I found meaning from this, it happens for a purpose, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't kind of extend that out or expect other people to believe that. And each person is so different in terms of their natural emotional reaction to it. And it's all okay. There's no best way to approach a cancer like this.
Exactly. And what I've come to realize, I like we were mentioning earlier, went to a conference a few weeks ago, and like everyone has their own story and everyone has their own journey. So, I mean, this was my experience, but to your point, like it could be totally different for, Kelly or for Ian or whoever it is. It's a totally different experience. But I think what seems to help, at least with what we try to do, and I'm sure what you do at your retreats as well, is just kind of talking about it. And I think people want to be heard. Yes. Is what the bottom line of it, what it all sort of is. And if you can do that, then I think it makes it a little bit better and give someone that outlet to share their unique story.
Exactly. And just to reflect back on that, I honestly think that my job as an oncologist is one of the first and most important things that I do is to try to understand the person in front of me. It's because even just listening, sometimes it's a really difficult situation, and I'm listening and I'm reflecting and I'm normalizing those emotions. I haven't done anything. But just to simply hear and understand and really respect that person's truth, I really think is therapeutic. And then people, another power of the retreat is people don't feel so isolated, and that we can kind of facilitate that in the day-to-day by simply listening and caring without trying to correct the situation. I think that's a key teaching.
Yeah. And you know what? It's kind of great too, because then and maybe that's good advice to all the family and friends, is just like listen. Because I think that's one of the best things, because everyone always is trying to search for that right word or the right, thing to say. But and oftentimes to what you're saying, it's just about listening. It doesn't have to be like the right thing to say. And
sometimes to learn the language as well. Like sometimes language is like, how are you really doing? And to be able to stay with, if the person having a tough day is not to try to, slap on a positive statement against it, just to allow them to have the emotions that they're having. But that language is how are you really doing on the inside, and then staying with it. And then naturally, something will come up, or they make a joke, or you can, make a joke and you feel it's appropriate. So it comes out, but it has to go into the listening phase first.
Yeah.
So this is really good teaching as well.
And I think you touched on something else there too. It's just like feeling that emotion. So, when you are having a really shitty day, because there's really shitty days when you're going through treatment or whatever. I mean, and there's really shitty days in everyone's life. So It's just kind of like let yourself feel shitty for that day. Maybe let yourself feel shitty for the next day, but then eventually trying to get yourself out of it. But I think really feeling that emotion is a key part as well.
Can you just give me an example of like what was a really shitty day for you, like in the midst of chemo, or a little anecdote from that time?
Yeah, there was. I was back and forth from school and home, depending on when my treatments were. So I lived by myself at school, or with a group of friends, but not with my parents when I say by myself. So I was supposed to go back to school. It was Monday afternoon. I was just having lunch with my mom and my sister, and I was really excited because the upcoming weekend was actually this big rafting trip at school. And I had finished treatment. I was doing pretty good. Should I say that because you'll hear the next part of the story? So we were at lunch, and I actually fainted at lunch. So we were out at a restaurant, so the ambulance had to be called. I ended up in the hospital for the afternoon, and I was released and went back home, but really shitty day because I went from, thinking I was going on this rafting trip the one weekend to essentially like my blood count was so low that I had to have a blood transfusion, but I was just lying in bed until I finally admitted to myself that I had to have the blood transfusion. So I think I think it's about managing expectations when you're sick too. I really pushed myself where I shouldn't have pushed myself. And looking back on it, I think that would be the one thing I would have changed. Like listening to my body more. Like I wasn't a regular 21-year-old. Although I wanted to be a regular 21-year-old going to class, like I should have listened to my body and like stayed in bed some days. And also like
and to take that to the next step is, I mean, that was a hugely disappointing scenario, right? I'm going rafting this weekend, suddenly I'm laying in bed having been a transfusion. And, you know, it's okay to feel the sadness and the emotions and the frustrations and have the tears come out at that point. I honestly think that, you know, having that cry at that point can actually make you feel better ultimately, just to be able to acknowledge the emotions that are going through.
No, for sure. It was, I think too, like when you're at the point where like it would tire me out to walk around the corner that week, even to like go to the bathroom. So it actually like went away from being disappointed about the rafting trip, which would seem so frivolous, to, you know, just wanting to have the energy to like sit at the dinner table, really. And I think now what I see in myself is what that did is I remember those moments when I was like couldn't move and just saying like, you know what, when I can move again and when I do have the energy again, I'm never going to stop. So I think that's half the reason why New York City is like such a buzz for me, right? Because it's never stopped. Yeah. So
you know what, and that's, I just want to, because you're so full of kind of wisdom, lived wisdom. That is an example of what I call reframing. So you're sitting there, you're getting a blood transfusion, you're feeling super tired, you know, then you're up at the supper table and you're too tired to even kind of sit there. And, you know, most people could just say, oh, this is awful, I hate this, et cetera, et cetera. But you're reframed. So the same thing is happening, but you're saying to yourself, when I get strong again, I'm going to really appreciate the energy that I have and be able to do things that I absolutely love to do. And then I'll appreciate it that much more because I'm feeling so crappy right now. So that's a perfect reframe of a very difficult situation.
Yeah. And like, I'm sure medical experts wouldn't agree with this, but like for me, over the fight against cancer was very mental. So it was very much about, and granted, like, it happened really quickly too, so I didn't have time to be negative. I'm sure if it was a longer drawn out process, there would have been more downs than there were ups. But I consciously like told family and friends, if you're gonna have a negative attitude about anything, don't bring it around me, because I don't, you know, there's gonna be points where I'm gonna myself be negative. I don't want to hear sad things or negative thoughts from others that when I'm at a high are gonna bring me down to a low. So that was a conscious thing. I think the fact of how fast it happened and the pure shock was on my side, because it was very much just like a let's get through this and keep fighting this sort of thing. But ultimately, like, everyone staying positive around me and me trying to stay as positive I could, I think really helped the process.
Right. Yes. And so understanding it, you know, it's so good, and I really appreciate the fact you're allowing me to interrupt and just talk about a few key ideas there. One idea is that you clearly told your family what your expectations were. Right? Because sometimes we get stuck, sometimes at retreats I say it's really good just to be honest, both, you know, the family members and the person with the cancer diagnosis. But the person with the cancer diagnosis who says, look, I don't want you guys to bring me down when I'm feeling positive, is a clear communication. And that's fantastic. And the other one is that you understood your own psyche. You said, I've got chemotherapy to get through. I'm going to kind of bear down and just work really hard through this. And that is like a fighter spirit, and I love it. And yet there are other people I would say to them, it's okay to let go and to feel badly at times and not to try to overmanage this. So each person has their own kind of psychological mechanism of getting through a difficult time. And you knew it, and you understood that right from the get-go, and boom, you did it.
And I think too, like, when there is a negative time, letting yourself feel it. Like, I remember sometimes, you know, you're going to sleep with the pick in your arm, and that really sucked for me. And that's when, you know, the quiet moments are when you're kind of emotional by yourself. So there's definitely highs and lows, but overall, I think keeping as much as you can, maybe it's not a positive state, but just like a focused state, because some days
Yes.
are really shitty and you're not going to be positive.
Right.
But keeping like eye on the goal or eye on the prize. And it's
Mhm.
funny because, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot too, when I was done chemo, I didn't want chemo to be over.
You're
Apparently,
like,
it's like quite common that people don't like the end of their chemo because they feel very much like they're doing something proactive towards it. Even to this day, I mean, 9 years later, I love going for my checkups. Like I would go for my checkups like twice a year if they'd let me, 3 times a year if they'd let me.
yeah,
I'm
good news. Yeah.
yeah, I'm never not going for my checkup because it still feels like you're staying on top of it. You know,
Mhm.
you're doing something. Hopefully, that's a little proactive
Yeah.
and to manage things. So, and I think that's just my natural Type A personality too. But
That's great. Again, there's the reframe. I do want to reflect that end of treatment, end of chemotherapy is usually a very stressful time for a lot of people with cancer diagnosis because they feel like the medical system is no longer watching them, and then suddenly they're not in the midst of treatment. They're actually trying to figure out how they're going to re-ejectorize into their lives, and that's it's a lot of stress, a lot of unknown, and so that's a time when people may need extra help, psychologist, social worker to or a support group,
yeah,
a girl to really help them keep one step back together.
yeah, I think that's it, right? It's because if you were in a job you hated and now you've had this big life experience, how do you then go back into this job that you hate?
Right.
Oh, or
So
if you're in a bad relationship, or you all of a sudden everything kind of gets turned around. So, it's if you hated that, why am I going back to it? And if I'm not, what's next? And what's so
yes.
my experience again was a little different because I was in school, so I knew what was next. But we hear a lot of women that it's kind of like they don't want to go back to what they were doing before because it seems like not as meaningful.
Right. Right. So two questions out of that one. Um, One is this whole question. You have a cancer diagnosis. Maybe you're in a bad relationship. You decide to let that one go. But moving forward, as you're looking for a mate or dating or whatever, have you had that issue around telling that potential partner that you had a cancer diagnosis? It's a big one for women.
Yeah, no, it's a huge one, and it's funny that you say that because we did at the conference we were at. We had this huge session, and it was all women in a room, and all of the kind of topics that they wanted to talk about were related to like guys and dating.
Yes.
Whereas I was like, can we talk about like, is there anything else that the rest of us could kind of join in here? For me, like on a personal note, it's actually come across fairly easily because I have Pink Pearl. So there's always been, if there's a dating scenario, I think one of the questions at this support group anyway was like, when is the right time to bring it up?
Right.
So, and the response from the facilitator in the bigger group was, it's dependent on each situation. So I can only speak to myself. But for me, it's always actually come across fairly easy because with Pink Pearl, I'll always have like an event or a retreat coming up or something because it's very much a part of my day-to-day life.
Right.
So, then the question is, well, why? What is that? What's that about? I've had people like Google.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Stalk you.
before I've told it. So it kind of comes up naturally for me in that way because of the Pink Pearl thing. And I mean, in deciding to do the not-for-profit, I've obviously like opened myself up, to be on the internet and things like that. And so it might, I have to be open about it on date like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So, but I could, from the perspective of other women, from what I've heard is, it hasn't either gotten a great reaction or they've maybe waited too long or they did it too soon. So I think it all sort of depends on like the person and the situation. And realistically, like everyone has something, right? So whether it's my cancer diagnosis or whether the girl beside me, had a really bad previous relationship or whatever it is, everyone has something that they have to tell their partner.
Right.
So, and you hope that, the partner that you have at least if you want to be with them long term, is going to handle that reaction well, right? It's going to have a decent reaction to that. And then if not, then probably not a long term thing anyway.
Right. True test of the relationship in some sense.
Yeah. So maybe it gets serious a little sooner than you would necessarily get serious in terms of the serious life conversations.
Right.
But for me, it's usually happened fairly naturally, which is good, I guess.
Great. Yeah. Thank goodness. Yeah, and thank goodness for all your great work as well. And in fact, this is a good segue because the person you're quoting is a woman talking about being strong as well. So are you willing to read the quote as part of the interview?
Let me pull it up here. So this is actually one of my favorite quotes, and one that I continue to share with friends that are not even a cancer diagnosis, but just like a tough time. So it's from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You are able to say to yourself, I have lived through this horror. I can take the next thing that comes along. You must do the thing you think you cannot do." And so I think it's really powerful because it's like, again, we talked about that focus and facing something and overcoming it. And for me anyway, it was like I found it when I was sick, because I think when you're sick too, you're always looking for like inspirational motivation.
Right, yes. Keep the energy up, yeah.
Yeah, so I had found that when I was sick, and I was like, you know what, at the end of this, you're going to have all these other attributes that kind of create who you are as a person now because you fought this fight. And it doesn't have to be a cancer fight. It could be, losing someone close to you. It could be whatever, really. So that's one of my favorite quotes. Whenever I'm having a bad day, I kind of go back to that.
Getting through a bad relationship, just realizing, geez, I made a bad decision here, and it was awful, and I learned something about myself. I learned something about life, and now I'm stronger, have more experience. Make that decision next time. So again, it's this idea of reframing, of saying, yes, that's awful, but how can I look at this differently in a way that can make me feel better? And the fact is, you can be stronger from what you're doing.
Sure. We did a couple weeks ago did an exercise where it was like your likes and your dislikes about yourself, and I realized that all my likes, for the most part, a lot of them had been kind of exploded because of this cancer experience. So like the strength and the courage and all of that, things I liked about myself, I had them before, but they've come more to the forefront now with having gone through that journey. So it's kind of cool because it could change you to kind of like more things about yourself that you didn't necessarily knew you liked at the start of things. So
greater appreciation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Something significant. I guess the other reflection I had from the first part of our conversation is around body image and self-esteem. And recently I've been thinking about that from a kind of evolutionary perspective. And the evolutionary perspective is that young people do want to be attractive. And in some sense, we're driven to be confident, to appear strong, and to be beautiful in some way, to be attractive in some way, because all that kind of genetics, all our predispositions are to try to get a mate, and get a good mate, and to reproduce and so on. And so, I mean, before I really thought about that, sometimes I think, well, it's kind of superficial to worry about your looks, but I just want to acknowledge and respect that we are genetically programmed to want to look good, and to have those feelings of I dislike my body now, I dislike my image now, is natural and normal. And so on the one hand, we want to kind of recognize there's a genetic influence there. On the other hand, we want to kind of use our kind of high rational mind to say that I'm a beautiful person. I can influence life in different ways. And so I just wanted you to reflect on that kind of idea that it is normal and natural to feel, especially around body image and self-esteem, I guess.
No, for sure. And I think, there's a whole organization around look good, feel better, right?
Right.
So I think it's for me, I did like get up in the morning and get ready because it made you feel made you feel good and it made you feel normal and you know, and kind of like your regular everyday. So there was a big focus on that. I think being a little bit away from it now, it's also just a really great appreciation for your body and like the functionings of things. So, you know, when I go for a run now, when I'm like really trying to crank out the last few minutes, I'm like just be really happy that you can run.
Right.
And then, you know, you run a little faster.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, there's the part when you are sick for me was about still, you know, maintaining your appearance, I guess, if you will. But the post-cancer, it's being thankful for the fact that, you know, I can move and I am here and it's great that I still have, like, I'm able to function normally. So
Yes.
I think it's twofold there, right?
True appreciation for what I call the miracle of your body, the fact that you're able to talk and listen and connect and do all the things you can in this world and go for a run. I mean, that's miraculous in some sense. And so we often just take life for granted, you know, and that's just what young people do, kind of thing. But having gone through this, then you can actually truly appreciate your life. And the other reflection that I really like, it's that symbol. So you're in the midst of chemotherapy, you're feeling crappy, you don't like how your body's looking that particular day, and that's all natural and normal. I'm not trying to judge that in any way or form. And then there's that loving act. I'm going to put on my makeup now. I'm going to greet this day with a smile, even though you know, I'm feeling crappy and so on. And I think that's a huge symbol about self-love and self-care. We often talk about exercise, for instance. Exercise sends a very powerful message from spirit to mind to body about living and getting better and stronger and so on. And that's powerful. Going to a retreat, going to you know, a Pink Pearl meeting, going to those events, that's very powerful. Saying, I want to get better, I want to be well, I want to feel, I want to grow. But just even that symbol of, I'm going to take care of myself and try to look as good as I can is a very powerful message as well. I hadn't kind of understood that until, you know, last 6 months even. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why things like meditation and yoga are so great too, because it's combining that physical activity with true reflection. So I know you brought us through the meditation at the beginning, and you know, I try to do it on a regular basis, but just kind of stop and sit and be quiet for 5 minutes at the start of your day and be thankful that you are starting that day. You know, I don't do it every day, but it is a great thing to just kind of appreciate the physical, I guess, and also the movement of things. And so I think a yoga meditation is really, it's something that I started to enjoy a lot more post-cancer.
Yes, and I mean, there's incredible data around how your brain actually changes through practicing meditation. I mean, there's a balance between the left part of the brain and the right part of the brain, frontal lobes. And as you practice meditation and relaxation, you empower the left side. People feel naturally more happy, they have better concentration, more empathy, they're more creative, their health is better. And you know, I like presenting to young adults because they have a huge number of years to influence how their brains grow and change over the decades. And so you really can create those kind of states of mind that you cherish, such as, you know, peacefulness or joy or gratitude or meaning. So you can actually bring your mind into those states more often. You actually turn the states into traits, and your brain literally changes over the decades, over the years. And so there's this incredible capacity to have a cancer experience and grow from it and learn from it and be a better person ultimately in the world.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll go do yoga tomorrow then for sure.
Yeah, the neuroscience is great. The last question I have for you, you've said that your priorities have changed now after being given a cancer diagnosis. Do you want to see what's most important to you in the biggest picture?
Yeah, I think what's most important, I mean, family, friends are obviously at the top of the list, but for me, what I don't ever want to regret is not taking every experience that I can. So it's all about like living this really full life. And I think I think sometimes that's exhausting because it's like always trying to take on everything that can come your way, but it's also very fulfilling, at the end of the day or the end of the week or end of the month, to say, I accomplished this, this, and this. So, besides the obvious of relationships, to me it's all about doing as much as I can and as much time as I have.
Right. And that could be another 60 years, so, or whatever.
Super cliche, but like no one ever knows how much time we have, right? So it's all about, to me, like packing as much life into as much time as I can. So
yeah, and just to reflect, you've got the incredible genetics and natural psyche to be able to do that. I just also say that we are human, and therefore we have limits in terms of what we can do on the day-to-day, and that's why, in some sense, why I think priorities are so important. Because once you have your priorities, say, look, I want to nurture the relationship with, my partner and my kids or whatever it is, or my parents. So that actually takes a priority. And then my next priority is kind of self-care or whatever it is, career, whatever it is that you really have a passion for. And then it means that you need to cut away the things that are not helpful, the things that don't feed our soul, in order that we have the energy to do the things that we love to do. And so that's an extremely important point. In addition to living your day fully, and sometimes people also need that kind of rest to keep things in balance, and so that they can, do the things they love to do.
Yeah. Well, I think when you said energy, it's all about energy, right? And where do you want to put that energy? So you won't really hear me gossip that much. You won't really hear me like waste time dating guys that don't matter, because it's all about like the energy that you put into things.
Yes.
So yeah, you definitely like focus in more. Well, for me anyway, focus in more on what's important. So yeah.
Wonderful. Do you want to just conclude in some way, just to give a kind of shout out to Pink Pearl and the foundation and some of the services? I just want to make sure you get an opportunity to promote a great foundation that you've created.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've heard about my personal journey, and so that's where Pink Pearl started. Essentially, 9 years ago, there wasn't a lot of support organizations out there for young adults. And what we focus on is young women specifically, with all types of cancer. So at least from what I've come across, they're now young adult organizations, and there's maybe one or two that focus on women with breast cancer, but I obviously didn't have breast cancer. A lot of women that come to our retreats didn't, so we're more kind of all-encompassing in that way. And we do 2 retreats a year, in the fall and in the spring, usually in very lovely areas. Our next one's in Niagara-on-the-Lake at Queen's Landing. So it's all about getting away from your everyday, to just really connect with like-minded women, and to relax and to treat yourself a little bit and reflect. So those are the retreats. We also have a great in-hospital support package that we've developed with Cheravinsky. One of the call-outs, I think it's actually important to take a step back to, is that any program that we've developed has been because, not only I think it's something we need, having gone through it, but because the women within our group have called it out and asked for it. So, it's not a doctor or a nurse or anyone telling the women what they need. It's the women themselves saying, this is what we need. And then we go back, and a lot of part of our retreats too, we do a segment where it's conversation on what could we do to help you. So it all comes from the women, and that's where this support package came. One of the call-outs were, it'd be great to have kind of like a compass or like an advisor, like a case manager, if you will, as you're going through this process. And so what this support package is a list of resources on one side, a list of questions to ask on the other, and also comes with this great, you probably can't see it right now, but this support bracelet.
Right.
So one of the other call-outs from another woman is when you're a child and you're going through cancer, you get what's called bravery beads. So the bracelet's kind of our take on the bravery bead, if you will. So the support package has been a great thing. We have family support days in the summer, Ask the Expert sessions, which we actually have coming up next week. So, I mean, all the information can be found on our website, pinkpearlfoundation.org, and we're pretty active in social media too. So a lot of fun stuff going on. We're all volunteers, so it's totally a passion project. everyone has full-time jobs. So it's been really rewarding though, and getting to
Mm,
meet some great women in the process.
no doubt, great founder as well. So just maybe we can just finish with that that reflection. You know, something that was tremendously difficult when you're age 21 and you brought your spirit, your passion, and great heart right into the world. So why don't we just finish off with just another moment of meditation reflection. So bring yourself back to that posture. Bring yourself back to the connection of the feet on the floor and the weight of the body in the chair. Bring yourself back to a sense of breath, sense of your life energy in your body. Bring yourself back to just that sense of emotional energy in your heart. Whatever's there is totally fine. Not you. You want to generate that sense of love, that sense of compassion. Maybe for those who are listening, watching, you think of somebody in your life. Maybe it's someone with an adult with a cancer diagnosis or somebody that will have a diagnosis in the future. Just imagine that person in your mind's eye and just extend your loving energy to that person. Just really allow your heart to warm and swell, bring to mind. And if there's suffering anywhere from, just allow that wish, that prayer, that aspiration to go to them. They receive it with that sense of possibility, that sense of healing. And somehow it's helping them in some way or form. And extend that out as well to all of the young adults who had a cancer diagnosis here in Canada and elsewhere. Wherever they are, if they can find peace, comfort, healing, whatever way is best for them, that was the body, mind, or spirit. And release that again. Bring yourself back to being grounded, back to your strong spine, back to your open heart, back to that sense of possibility of the mind expanding. And back to that wonderful guest, Elise. Thank you so much for sharing your great spirit and your story. Just being yourself. Really, really appreciate it. It's
Yeah.
wonderful to be with you.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah. We will see each other, I guess, in October. I'm gonna
Yeah.
do something for the young adults there in Hamilton, so it's gonna be great to meet in person. Thank you
Yeah,
so
we're
much.
looking forward to it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.